Hi everybody, this is Noelle for Petitti Garden Centers, and we are going to do a spotlight on peonies. And there's been this resurgence of classic flowers in the garden, and peonies for our area in Northeast Ohio have always been a favorite. They are a reliable, dependable, really easy to grow plant in Northeast Ohio for us. And so we love them. We absolutely love them. There's three major types that we grow in this area. So we actually grow a standard bush peony, okay, or sometimes called herbaceous peonies. We also grow a tree peony, which is also known as a woody peony. And we also grow an Itoh peony, which is what they call intersectional peonies, where basically you take a tree peony and a bush peony, you put them together and you get the Itoh peony. So we're going to talk about how to care for these today and give you all the details that you need. First, to start out with, sun. Peonies really do appreciate a full sun condition. So you're looking at 6 or more hours of sunlight per day. If you were to put them in light shade, especially for the softer pastel colors, it might help kind of keep the crispness of the color, but they really don't like shade that much. So if it's light, dappled just a bit, that's okay, but still look for that 6 or more hours of sunlight where they're going to do best. As far as soil's concerned, they really like nice, deep, well-drained, fertile soil conditions. In Northeast Ohio, we don't necessarily have that. We've got a lot of clay soil around us, so you want to make sure that you're amending that soil that you are going to plant your peony in. And using organic matter when you are planting is always a good thing. So when we talk about organic matter, we're talking compost, planting mixes, sweet peat, all those great things that you can add to your soil to make it a lot easier to work with. It turns out to be better draining and all those good things too. So do think about that before you plant your peonies. I should also mention with soil, pH can be slightly acidic to slightly basic or alkaline. So anywhere in between, just slight to slight, neutral is great. Okay, so no problems there whatsoever. Now, watering. As far as peonies are concerned, they like it just like about every other perennial that we talk about, tree and shrub that we talk about. We're looking for 1 inch of water 1 time per week. It could be with the rainfall or with irrigation. Just watch your rain gauge, okay? And if you get a 1/2 inch of rain that week, go ahead and supplement the other 1/2 inch so you get a full 1 inch of watering, okay? Deep, thorough waterings, watering in the morning, not watering on the foliage, but watering at the base of the plant is always really important with peonies. They can get some botrytis, which is also known as gray mildew. They can get some other spots, leaf spots here and there. So try to avoid the foliage. That's always a really good thing. And always try to apply that water at the base of the plant. Next thing is fertilization, and they do like a good fertilization, no problem. They're going to be like your standard perennial fertilization schedule that we talk about. So we'd prefer you use a slow release fertilizer once in spring as they're emerging and pushing those new shoots out. And then again, once midsummer, typically after they're finished blooming, just to give them a little bit more energy to continue to absorb that sunlight and of course convert that energy into their rhizomes underneath the soil. So that's something that you want to really remember. You can use Plant Tone the first feeding and then use Osmocote the second feeding, which is generally what Angelo likes to use on perennials. But I really like Bulb Tone, and you can use Bulb Tone for your peonies, no problem whatsoever. Bulb Tone the first feeding, Osmocote the second, or Bulb Tone for both. I really like them for peonies, no problem, okay? Now, as far as maintenance is concerned, these guys are pretty low maintenance, But the one thing that you want to remember with peonies for the most part is the staking or support that they do require. These flowers get pretty large, and of course their stems are herbaceous or soft. So you get a big flower, and let's say it rains and they fill with water, they really can topple over and end up putting their flower face in the dirt, okay? So do get your stakes and your supports out early. You can use peony rings, you can use single flower stakes with a loop on them. There's lots of different devices to keep your peonies looking good and keeping their flowers out of the soil. But here's the thing that's really, really good about supporting them is keeping the air circulation flowing through the plant material. The better the air, hey, we got a nice little wind right here while we're talking about it, but the more air circulation you can provide moving through that plant, the less disease you're going to see on peonies. And of course, in Northeast Ohio, right now we have a cool, wet spring. So that can kind of help develop, unfortunately, some diseases that might occur like mildews and those types of things too. So just keep that in mind. Supports are really, really important in the maintenance of this plant. Another thing that you want to know about peonies is that they are one of the perennial families, and there's just a handful of them that really prefer being divided in late summer or fall, okay? So if you are thinking about digging and dividing those peonies, make sure you do it late summer or fall. They really don't like to be divided in spring when they're actively growing. You may lose your flowering eyes for that season. So really refrain from doing that. And that works when we talk about the rule of thumb of division. Usually a spring bloomer is best divided in the fall. Fall bloomer is best divided in the spring. And then if it's a midsummer bloomer, you can divide it either spring or fall. Okay, so peonies fall into that fall division category, okay? When you do divide, go ahead and you're going to take a sharp knife and you're going to cut the peony rhizomes that are in the soil. You want to have 3 to 5 eyes on each piece as you divide, okay? Then you want to make sure that your peonies are planted at the same depth they were planted before. And it's usually you want the eyes to be about 1 inch below the soil surface. So do look for that. Take a ruler out with you when you're digging, okay? Kind of measure where those peony eyes are at just below the soil surface, and then go ahead when you're prepping that new hole and taking your division and going ahead and planting it, make sure you get them at that same height. If you bury peonies too deep, that will delay their blooming, okay? So just make sure that you're kind of burying them at that same height, same soil level, and think about that 1 inch, just below the soil surface. And in that respect, we don't mulch around the base of the peonies, because if you add mulch layers on top, you again are kind of burying that peony eye lower. So just mulch around the outside of the peony, not ever on the inside of the peony. So those are basically the two things with maintenance. Other than that, a lot of folks will ask about the foliage, like how long should I keep the foliage up? And I actually should probably mention deadheading flowers is good. Peonies are one of the best cut flowers available out there in the garden. And so these flowers can last, 10 days, sometimes in a vase. And they're gorgeous. Some of them are really wonderfully fragrant. So as far as deadheading them, don't be afraid to take the entire flower and stem and go down as low as you can go. But right here, I have red charm, and I would cut right above this side node where the foliage is coming out. So I would cut down this way. So that's probably a good 10-inch stem that you could develop, and use in a vase. Cut at an angle so it has the most surface area to absorb water out of a vase. Go ahead and you can either use lukewarm water or cool water to put your peonies, and just make sure, to keep that water clean and change it out. Whenever you see just a little bit of cloudiness or what have you. Okay, so that will keep them really, really nice. I should mention, cutting peonies, you can cut them at the marshmallow stage. And right now, this one is going to be the closest. This is actually purple spider. And the marshmallow stage is not that they're shaped like a marshmallow, but this one kind of looks like a small marshmallow. It's when you're feeling the bud and it kind of squishes like a marshmallow. It has that kind of soft, springy feeling to it. And so that is something that you want to look for. I would give this probably a couple more days before I would cut it. But at the marshmallow stage, if you cut peonies, go ahead and cut your stem, and then you can actually wrap them in paper, okay, like a parchment paper that you would use in the kitchen. You can wrap the bud and the stem in parchment paper. You can put them in the refrigerator, and you can actually kind of hold them in that sort of marshmallow stage for about 2 weeks or so in the fridge. And then when you're ready to go ahead and use them in the vase, go ahead and do that. Just peel off the paper, put them in a vase with cool water, and you're ready to go. So that's kind of really interesting with peonies. They do hold very well with refrigeration. And like I said, you'll have those buds and blooms for a very long time in a vase if you do that, okay? So that's cool. So again, peonies, classic flower, very nostalgic, so easy. And I forgot to mention long-lived. My gosh, there are peonies that have lived over generations and generations in gardens. Typically you'll see them in kind of low rows or hedges in the landscape, which is fun and great. And there's so many beautiful colors as well. So you just can't go wrong. Another thing that I had to mention, I told Taylor I cannot forget about this, is everybody always asks about ants and peonies, and do the ants bring the, do the peonies bring the ants to the house, and all these things. No, okay? Biologically, ants and peonies have a relationship called mutualism, okay? And mutualism basically means that each of the organisms have a habit that benefits the other. So here you go. So peonies, if you look at bush peonies, when they're tightly kind of budded, they secrete sugar, or they have nectaries that are on top of that closed bud, okay? And sometimes they're sticky if you've ever felt a closed peony bud, and that's just that sugar secretion. Well, the ants find that, and of course, they will bring other ants to that peony to harvest that sugar, okay, and take it back to the nest. Does that mean that they are attracted to your home? No. Once they are done harvesting that sugar, they are pretty much done with that peony, okay? And here's the other thing. What the ants do for the peony is they actually fend off their food source. So what they'll do is they'll stay around that bud, they're eating that sugar, okay? But they are keeping other bad insects away from the peony. So they're actually protecting the peony in the long run. The peony is providing them a food source. There you go. It's mutualism at its best, okay? So don't worry about that. If you're cutting the flowers and there's still ants on there, if you cut them at the marshmallow stage, my gosh, just dip them in some cold water. Dip those buds in cold water, wash the ants off, no problem. If you're, in more open stage when you're cutting the flower, like red charm here, then go ahead, same thing, just kind of tap them or kind of just, wiggle the flower a little bit. You can knock the ants off, you'll be ready to go, okay? So they don't really want to be inside the house like that. Okay, great. Let's talk about the 3 types of peonies that we have. Again, bush peonies are your herbaceous or soft-tissued peony. They are the classic, absolutely. They usually grow around, let's say, 2 to 3 foot tall and wide, okay? Nice rounded form, beautiful green foliage typically. Some varieties tend to have maybe a little bit of a pinker foliage or redder foliage. It just depends on what variety you're growing, okay? The bush peonies are known as lactiflora. When you cut them, sometimes they have that milky sap, okay? So that'll happen. There's all different flower shapes. My goodness, there's so many different types of peonies. There's singles, doubles, anemone type, bomb type, all different types, okay? So really just whatever you really, really like when you come and see them, that's great, whatever appeals to you, okay? So you might have this like Red Charm. That's kind of a bomb type. It has a little bit of smaller petals in the center, and it has the larger petals on the outside. Purple Spider is going to be even a little bit more thin petaled, but definitely has more of a fuchsia purple color to it. So again, lots of variation. The next one's the tree peony. Tree peonies are very exotic, again, have woody stems below them, and they also have a graft point, kind of like a hybrid tea rose does, okay? So there's sort of this nodule down at the bottom, at the base of the plant here, and the grafted tree peony has been grafted onto a bush peony base, okay? So every once in a while we'll see it where you see a bush peony growing out of the bottom of a tree peony, okay? Ultimately, that's like suckering growth on a fruit tree, for example. And so you want to remove that bush peony stem back, take all of that green growth, if some is growing underneath where it has been grafted, and then you let this tree peony develop. Now, tree peonies can be a focal point in a garden. They are absolutely lovely. And when they get mature, they can bloom up to like 75 buds and blooms. So they are gorgeous. They do need some space though. So we're talking anywhere between, let's say, 3 to 5 foot tall, okay, and about 3 to 4 foot wide. So they're gonna be bigger. Give them some nice air space, air circulation room right around that plant, okay? Tree peonies have very exotic colors. All peonies have come from Asia for the most part, but hybrids have been developed throughout Europe and also the United States now. But this was one of the oldest types of peonies, and it was one of the finest peonies around the Chinese Imperial Palace garden. So they had a ton of tree peonies, all different colors, shapes and sizes, and also very, very fragrant. So these guys are gonna be beautiful, and Taylor will show you some pictures of tree peonies as well. The last one that's really cool and I think would make a wonderful addition to a sunny garden is the Itoh Peony or intersectional type. And like I said, they took a bush peony. Actually, Dr. Itoh, who is a Japanese botanist, he took a bush peony and a tree peony, put them together. You get the best of both worlds. You get a beautiful rounded, mounded habit, okay, from the bush peony. And then you get these beautiful, exotic, fragrant flowers from the tree peony. And the other really important thing to know about Itoh peonies is that they can develop one set of blooms, buds and blooms, and then go through and actually develop a second bloom cycle later in the season. So that's really, really cool for peonies, especially just to get the repeat blooms. That's awesome, okay? So Itoh peonies. The one that I'm standing by is called First Arrival, lovely pink. She opened like the last day or so, but flowers will usually last on peonies. On the shrub, usually 7 to 10 days. But the thing is, it's always the weather. So if you get a heavy rainstorm or what have you, that'll knock your flowers right off. So like I said, if you want to harvest them early, cut them when they're a little bit tighter in that marshmallow stage. That's going to be nice for you to enjoy indoors in a vase. The yellow behind is also an Itoh peony. It's called Bartzella. Absolutely love that plant as well. And if you're looking for some bright, beautiful yellow, my gosh, she is a really pretty one. So think about that. So the Itoh peonies, I don't know if I mentioned, but like 3 to 4 foot tall and wide. So they still take up quite some space in the garden, but really, really beautiful plant material, okay? So folks, lots to choose from, Always a lot of different colors and varieties, very easy care, very long lived. And I also didn't mention they're drought resistant as well. So yes, we've had a wet spring, but as soon as we hit the heat of summer and we get much drier, no problem. They can really handle that once their root system is established and they're doing their thing. So don't forget to feed them twice a season, spring and midsummer, with a slow release fertilizer, and cut your peonies and enjoy them in the garden and indoors, and enjoy.